Hello everyone, Reza here. In this video, we will learn how to bulk add multiple rows of data to an Excel file in one go. Our Cloudflow will leverage the Excel API to add multiple rows of data from a data source in one go to an Excel table, thereby improving the performance and speed of our flow runs. Let's check this video out in action. Let's create our flow. I'll trigger this flow manually. I'll pick the manually trigger a flow option, give my flow a name, click create. Once my flow triggers, the first step I will take, I'll add an action to create an Excel file. I'll search for create file. I'll go ahead and create this Excel file in my OneDrive. Create file. Folder path. If I put a slash, it will create the file in the root of my OneDrive. If you would like to create it in a specific folder, I'll create one called data export and I'll put a slash. If a folder with this name exists, it will create the file in that folder. If not, it will create the folder and then create the file. File name. I'll give this a unique name. I'll call it student data underscore. To make it unique, I'll put the current date and time. I'll use an expression here. Format, date time, UTC now, and I'll format it using the full date format by using the string literal F. I'll click add. That's the name of my file. .xlsx. That's the Excel file extension. File content is a mandatory field. My goal here is to simply create an Excel file first. So in file content, I'll just put a space. Next step, I'll go and add an action to create a table in this Excel file. For that, I'll pick the create table action from the Excel Online Business connector. Location will be OneDrive for Business. Document library will be OneDrive. File. This, I'll pick dynamic content and select the unique identifier of the file that was created by the create file action. Table range. Here, we need to use the A1 notation. At this point, think about what are the different columns that you would like to export in your Excel file. For my scenario from my SharePoint list, I would like to export these 7 columns. So here in table range, I'll start from $A1, that's the first cell in Excel, and I'll go all the way to the 7th letter, which is G. A1 to G1. I'll click show all. Table name, I'll call it my student table. Column names. I need to enter the column names separated by a semicolon or a comma. I'll use student ID, name. These are my 7 columns. Now at this point, I'll save my flow and I will go ahead and test this flow manually. Run the flow. The flow triggers, creates the file in my OneDrive, and then goes ahead and creates my table. In my OneDrive, I have a folder created called data export, and right here is my Excel file that got created by Power Automate. In this Excel file is a table that includes all those 7 columns, A1 to G1, and this table has the name student table. Now, I would like to export the data from my data source into this table. Let's edit the flow. Next action that I will add is the get items action from my SharePoint list. I'll select this action, select my SharePoint site, select my SharePoint list. I'll go to show all. By default, it will only load 100 rows. Top count is where I can define a maximum count of 5,000. My list has greater than 5,000 rows. For that, I can go to settings and turn on pagination and give a threshold limit, which can be a maximum of 100K. Next step, I would like to load all this data in my newly created Excel files table. Typically, we will run a for loop on all the items in the SharePoint list and start adding the rows one by one to that Excel table. That though is a very expensive operation for scenarios where you have large data. Plus, every action in the flow will count towards the API limits that depend upon your license. So to keep the flow efficient, performant, keep the API count low, and in one go upload all the data to that Excel table, we will leverage the power of the Microsoft Graph API. The Graph API has a create table row endpoint that we can call. This endpoint, I will target my Excel table in OneDrive, and in one query, I can post the array of values to that Excel table. The key here is to create an array of array objects. Within those objects are the values of my columns. So let's go ahead and first frame this in our flow. Get items will return all the columns from my SharePoint list, including the hidden columns. I am only interested in those 7 columns. So right after this, I will add a select data operation action. Select from dynamic content body/valued output from the get items action. This includes the list of items that are returned from that action. This I need to map it in this format, which is an array of data. For this, in the map property, I'll switch to text mode and first put the array notation. Inside this, I'll put all my columns in the same order that I defined when I was creating my table. First column is student ID. That will come from dynamic content ID from the get items action. ID is my column in SharePoint. Then I need the name, which comes from the title column. I'll put a comma. Next, I'll pick title. Next, I need region. Region is a choice column, so I'll pick region value, single select choice column. Then I need the class information. Class is a lookup column. Once again, I will pick class value. Then I need manager, which is a person type column. So I'll pick the display name of the manager. You can pick any property that you would like to show in those columns. Next, I need enrolled date. And finally, my yes no type column, which is called active. Now the next step is for me to call this Graph API endpoint to post my data to that Excel table. For that, we have an action. I'll search for HTTP. Since I have my file uploaded in OneDrive, the Office 365 users connector, which is a standard licensed connector, has a send an HTTP request action that supports the endpoint me. So I can leverage the send an HTTP request action to directly call my Graph API. Graph API begins with https graph.microsoft.com/v1.0/me/drive/items/ what's that item, where's that file in my OneDrive. For that, I need to give an ID. Now this ID, when I used the create table action, this action has input parameters that I can leverage to frame that drive ID right here. And the easiest way for me to do that is by inserting an expression. An expression that does the following: split actions create underscore table. I'll put a question mark, inputs, question mark, parameters, question mark, file. I'll split this with dot. And from here, go and pick the array data at index 1. I'll click add. Right after this, /workbook/tables/ this is where I need to put the table name that I used in the create table action. My table was called student table /rows. This is the URL that I am framing for my Graph API endpoint, which is a post method. So I'll pick method post. I'll click show all. Here is the request body content attribute. This has to be in this format. So I'll copy this, go to Power Automate and paste it here. Values is this array of arrays. I'll remove this. Now this will directly come from the body of my select action. I've already framed what that array of arrays looks like. So here I'll go to expression, use the body function, body of the name of my action, which is called select. I'll click add. One of the things that is very important to check is the URI that you put here, drive items / my expression / workbook, and so on and so forth. When you enter the expressions, it does remove that slash, so make sure you add it back. This completes my flow. I'll save the flow. The flow has saved. Let's test it out. The flow has triggered. It creates the Excel file, creates the table. Now it's getting the items from my SharePoint list. It's a large list, more than 5,000 items. Pagination is ongoing. Gets all that data, frames that array of arrays, and then triggers my Graph API call. This single call took just 4 seconds. If I go back to my OneDrive, Here is the latest file. If I select this, here it has all the data that it has exported in one go. And to prove my point, my list has large data. In this scenario, around 5,300 rows. Right now, the Excel file is being saved in OneDrive. I could store it in any data source of my choice. Let's say a SharePoint document library, or maybe email it out as an attachment, or even better, create a share link in OneDrive. All those options are open. Let me show you how. Once this action is triggered, it is best to add a delay. It takes a few seconds before the content of that file is ready for consumption. I'll add a delay of 30 seconds. And then I'll use the action get file content from OneDrive for Business. The file identifier will be dynamic content ID from the create file action. This will get the content of the file. Let's also go ahead and call the create share link action from OneDrive for Business. Unique identifier of the file. ID dynamic content from create file action. The link type. Do you want the end user to just view it or edit it? I'll pick view. Link scope depends upon your organization settings. I have the option for anonymous, so I'll pick that. To add the Excel file to, let's say, a SharePoint library, I'll use the create file action from the SharePoint connector. I'll pick my SharePoint site address, folder path. I'll pick my document library, file name. I'll give it the same dynamic naming that I used for the create file action. You can choose any naming standard of your choice. File content will come from the dynamic content, file content property from the get file content action. And now let's also go ahead and send an email. I'll use the send an email action from the Office 365 Outlook connector. Who do you want to send this email to? You can make this dynamic. In my case, I'll email this out to myself. Email subject, I'll say student info data export. I'll put the same thing in the body. Click show all. Attachments. Here, I'll click add new item. Attachment name, I'll call it studentinfo.xlsx. The extension is very important. Content will be the dynamic content, file content coming from the get file content action. And the sharing link, for that, I'll add some text, link to file. I'll select this and click insert link, edit. For now, I'll just give a URL, save, toggle the code view, href. I'll remove that link. Right in between those two double quotes, dynamic content, I'll pick the dynamic content web URL from the create share link action. Save my flow. My flow is saved. Let's test it out. The flow triggers, starts doing all the work of exporting the data to that Excel file. Then it will initiate the delay and then begin the work of creating that file in a SharePoint document library, and will also send it out as an email attachment. Plus, the email body will have a share link to that specific file. The flow has completed. Here is my documents library in my SharePoint site. Here is that Excel file that includes all the data. And here is the email that I have received. It includes the Excel file as an attachment. Plus, there is a shared link that directly takes me to that Excel file. If you enjoyed this video, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.